Hello everyone, I am back again for another day of us learning about the moon. So yesterday we learned about the phases of the moon, right? We learned about new moon, we learned about crescent moon, we learned about half moon, we learned about full moon, and that then it kind of goes back up, right? And that it takes about a month. Well, the moon also affects a lot of other things here on Earth. Kind of affects the water, right? The oceans. How many of you have ever heard of low tide? How many of you have ever heard of high tide? Okay, well, probably at 6, you might have, you might not have. How I always remember high tide is if you've been to the beach before and you're sitting, right? And it becomes high tide and all of a sudden the waves come up to your chair and almost try to wash away everything and everybody's always running right up to the top of the beach so that they don't get wet. That is high tide. Well, the moon has a lot to do with this. So let's find out a little bit more about the moon. All right, all set? I hear you screaming, you bet. And we are back again with The Moon Book by Gail Gibbons. All right, let's go. So the moon affects the oceans too. The moon's pull, called gravity, everyone scream that word, gravity, on the oceans is strong enough to cause tides. Tides are daily raising and falling of the ocean's water, okay? And high tide happens about every 13 hours. This is because the moon takes about 25 hours to come back to the same place in the sky it was the night before. Tide differences vary around the world, and low tide happens about every 13 hours. So again, high tide is going to be when the water's high. Low tide is going to be when the water is low, caused by the moon. Some night sky gazers and astronomers can get a close-up view of the moon by looking through binoculars. Others look through telescopes. Some huge telescopes are used at observatories, okay? So again, sometimes you might use binoculars, sometimes you may use a telescope, okay, to take a better look at the moon. A close-up view of the moon's surface shows dark patches astronomers call plains or seas. Other areas are covered with craters, mountains and valleys. The moon's craters were formed between 3.5 and 4.5 billion years ago when meteors pounded its surface, okay? So I'm using this illustration, take a look. Okay, and you can kind of sometimes see that from even the Earth. You kind of see those crater marks, right? So basically what happened was there was something flying around the Earth, the moon at the time. It bashed into it, hit into it, and that is caused the craters, which are super big holes, okay? And that's kind of what we see from Earth. A little bit more. So for centuries, people have wanted to know more about our moon. In 1959, the Russian spacecraft Luna 3 transmitted to the Earth the first pictures of the far side, or backside of the moon. There aren't as many dark areas on that side as the side we see from Earth. Then, this was a big deal, guys, in 1961. So, for example, my mom remembers this. She was alive, right? She was a kid at the time, but she was alive. Maybe your grandparents probably, okay, or aunts and uncles were alive for this, so ask them. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy made a commitment, or JFK, made a commitment to put Americans on the moon before the end of the decade. At first, many American unnamed spacecrafts were sent. Pictures were taken. The Surveyor 1 landed on the moon in 1966. It sent back information about the moon's surface. The first manned orbit of the moon was made by Apollo 8 astronauts in 1968. Okay, so back in the 1960s, the President John F. Kennedy, JFK, he was like, we're going to the moon, okay? The United States is going to be first to send people to the moon. They had to send a lot of different spacecrafts there prior to like learn if it was safe for people to walk on the moon, okay? So on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin of the Apollo 11 mission became the first men to walk on the moon. So again, in 1969, we became the first people to walk on the moon. I'll show you some videos in class of that. It's definitely fascinating. Okay, there were 5 more Apollo landings on the moon. The last one, Apollo 17, was in 1972. The astronauts did experiments and gathered samples. Astronomers and other scientists were able to learn more about the history and nature of the moon. Okay, so then these astronauts went up into space. They had to have very sophisticated space suits, okay, because there is much less gravity on the moon than when compared to Earth, okay? On Earth, we're not floating around. I'm sitting in this chair. You're probably sitting in a chair because of gravity, okay? It holds us down. Well, on the moon, there's very little gravity. So if you've ever watched one of those astronauts walking on the moon, you'll see that they're kind of boop, 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 right? They're jumping all over the place. A lot less gravity, okay? There is no oxygen on the moon. So that's why they have to have space helmets on, okay? There is just a lot of rocks and things like that, and they were able to take it back, and then people were able to study it. There is also no water on the moon. So there is no living things on the moon, because we know in order for things to live, we need water and we need oxygen, both which the moon doesn't have. On a clear night, when the moon is in the sky, gaze up at it. We are still learning more about our closest neighbor, the moon. Okay. So, again, a few things. Moon, way less gravity, okay? Made of rocks, tons of craters, which are big holes, and the moon causes high and low tides. All right, guys, I can't wait to see your responses in Google Classroom. Keep up all the hard work. If you have any questions, let me know. Bye, guys.